Hey, welcome guys. Tonight we're heading back to an age when sideburns were aggressive and table legs were considered scandalous. Welcome to Victorian England, a place so obsessed with manners that even your houseplants needed to look respectable. If you think your family group chat is full of judgment, just wait until you meet a Victorian aunt before you settle in. Do me a favour. Hit the like button, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment telling me what your most ridiculous house rule was growing up. Now dim those lights, switch on a fan for that comforting white noise, and settle into whatever arrangement you call comfy bonus points. If you're wrapped in a blanket, that's not actively judging you. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in a world where your social status could be ruined by the way you buttered your bread? Where wearing the wrong color at the wrong time could spark a neighborhood scandal? Where you needed a guidebook just to have a conversation, without offending your local postman or causing a fainting episode at dinner? Would you survive a day with a corset tight enough to change your personality? Could you remember the correct order of 17 different spoons? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1857, deep in the heart of Victorian England. You are surrounded by mysterious etiquette manuals, ominous portraits of ancestors, and enough hair oil to lubricate an entire railway. The air smells faintly of coal smoke, boiled cabbage, and existential dread. Good luck. In Victorian England, etiquette wasn't just for dinner parties. It was a full-time job, and you, unfortunately, have just been hired. Every gesture, glance and sniffle has a hidden meaning, and one misplaced handkerchief could ruin your reputation before breakfast. Congratulations. You wake up in a world where making it through the day without sparking a minor scandal is a victory worthy of a parade and possibly a small, tasteful, monogrammed plaque. From the moment your eyes open, you're under surveillance not just from family, but from a silent army of etiquette expectations. Did you yawn before breakfast? Someone's already writing a letter to your aunt. Did you cough too loudly? The maid is whispering about your lack of breeding in the scullery. Let's start with the basics. Walking into a room in Victorian England, you don't just barge in like you're late for a Zoom call. Oh no, you enter quietly. Close the door softly, but not too softly, lest you seem indecisive. Stand up straight. And this is crucial. Make exactly the right amount of eye contact. Too much, and you're a social predator. Too little, and you're suspected of having secrets. Sometimes it's safest to just look gently at the wallpaper. Now let's talk about greetings. In the modern world, a wave or a nod does the trick. But in Victorian society, there's an entire choreography to the handshake firm, but not bone-crushing, and always with gloves if you're outside, because no one wants to actually touch another human's bare hand. If it can be avoided, bowing is another minefield. Bend too deeply, and you look desperate. Not deeply enough, and you're considered arrogant. If you curtsy, it needs to be the right depth for the time of day, the status of the person, and the weather. Yes, even the weather. There are diagrams in etiquette books. Sitting is no picnic either. First, never sit before your betters. Wait to be invited. When you do, perch on the edge of the chair, knees together, ankles delicately crossed, unless you're a man, in which case you must keep your legs exactly, for a degree, apart to avoid both scandal and discomfort. Hands folded, unless you're using them, but never fidget. Fidgeting suggests moral weakness, or possibly foreigners. Let's get to breakfast. If you thought eating was safe, think again. Victorian etiquette at the table is a combination of tactical maneuvering and silent performance. Art. Napkin on your lap, but never tucked. Toast must be buttered silently. No scraping sounds allowed. If you drop a crumb, ignore it. To acknowledge the fallen bread is to admit imperfection, which will be discussed in the weekly family review. And don't you dare mention the eggs. If they're runny, it's a test of character. If they're hard, it's a lesson in stoicism. Sneezing, coughing, or, heaven help you, blowing your nose is a crisis. Each requires a soft, apologetic pardon me. And a handkerchief produced so quickly and discreetly, it may as well have been summoned by sorcery. If you must sneeze more than once, you are advised to leave the table and possibly the county, and all this is before you've left the house. Stepping outside, the rules multiply. Walking too quickly means you're running from something too slowly, and you're obviously lost in scandalous thoughts. If you pass an acquaintance on the street, the nod must be exactly subtle enough to avoid looking eager. God forbid you tip your hat at the wrong moment. You'll be shunned by 3 streets worth of neighbours and possibly attacked by a disapproving goose. In short, Victorian etiquette is less about manners and more about surviving a 24-hour obstacle course of micro-judgments. It's like living your life on a tightrope while balancing a teacup and pretending you're not, terrified of the next surprise etiquette exam, and if you do it all perfectly well, you get to do it again tomorrow. Welcome to Victorian England, where even breathing is regulated and nobody is ever quite sure if they're doing it right. Ah, the corset, the medieval torture device disguised as a fashion statement. Getting dressed is a team sport involving at least 2 family members, a shoehorn and a fainting couch on standby. It's morning and you, dear Victorian, have just survived a night wrapped in a dressing gown, only slightly less structured than your living room drapes. Now it's time for the main event, the corset. Forget rolling out of bed and throwing on sweatpants. In Victorian England, getting ready is a contact sport, and you're about to lose step 1. Stand very still and exhale. Why? Because today you're about to trade comfort for a silhouette so unnatural it would make a modern chiropractor weep. Your maid or mother, or on a really unlucky day, your well-meaning little brother stands behind you, ready to perform an act of historical engineering. First, a layer of linen goes on to protect your skin from chafing, because the real enemy here is friction, and also the encroaching sense of doom. Then comes the corset itself, whalebone steel, and enough laces to rig a tall ship. You grasp the bedpost. Your assistant takes hold of the laces. There's a long, tense silence, like the moment before a bungee jump. Breathe in, they say. You try, but you're mostly breathing out. Your last full breath for the foreseeable future. The laces tighten and tighten. Someone yanks. You hear a creak. That might be your spine, or possibly the furniture. By the time the corset is fully cinched, your waist has shrunk by several inches. Your lungs are somewhere up by your collarbone, and your ribs are questioning. Their life choices. Is it comfortable? Absolutely not, but you look respectable, which in Victorian terms means ready to faint gracefully at a moment's notice. Speaking of fainting, the Victorian era didn't invent the fainting couch for nothing. The average day involves sudden head rushes, shallow breathing, and the occasional restorative whiff of smelling salts. Doctors of the day call it female hysteria. Modern science calls it oxygen deprivation. Either way, nobody wants to admit. The real reason you keep blacking out is that your organs are trapped in a historical game of musical chairs. Now, what can you do in a corset? Sit, provided you enjoy, hovering 3 and above your chair. Walk, if you like, mincing steps. Dance, only with enough rigid posture to serve soup from your shoulder blades. Want to eat? Choose your food wisely. Victorian menus are designed around the corset. Soups and small bites or enlarged lunch is code for rearranging your organs and hope for the best. Dessert, yes, but only if you enjoy the feeling of your ribs clinking together like a wind chime. Wearing a corset isn't just about suffering for beauty. It's about social survival. The tighter your waist, the more self-control and moral purity you supposedly possess. There are entire etiquette manuals dedicated to the art of lacing up. Too loose, people talk. Too tight, people talk even more, preferably after you've fainted into the aspic. And what about men? Oh, they're not exempt. Male corsets exist, though they're sold under names like waistcoat, stiffener, or gentleman's support. Of course, nobody admits to wearing one except for politicians, actors, and that one suspicious uncle who claims he's just built that way. In the end, the corset is less a garment and more a lifestyle. It controls your breathing, your movement, your appetite, and sometimes even your emotions. Tempers are short, patience is thin, and fainting spells are simply the body's way of filing a formal complaint. So next time you complain about a tight pair of jeans, remember, at least your trousers have never required a personal assistant, a pulley system, and a set of smelling salts. And mercifully, you probably won't pass out at brunch. That's the Victorian corset conundrum, where fashion, frustration, and the occasional fractured rib all come standard. It's breakfast, but don't even think about slouching. Each bite is choreographed. Napkin to lap elbows off the table, and heaven help you if your spoon touches the tablecloth. You'd think breakfast in Victorian England would be the most relaxed meal of the day, but you'd be wrong. This isn't your Saturday morning in pajamas scrolling your phone over a bowl of cereal. No, this is the daily performance of status, discipline, and a subtle game of which relative will crack first. Even before the first crumb of toast falls, you are being evaluated by your parents, your siblings, the housekeeper, and possibly the family portrait glaring down from the wall. You take your seat, but not just any seat. There's a protocol. Father sits at the head, mother at the foot, and you're somewhere in the middle, strategically placed to minimize the risk of offending both. You pull out your chair silently, unfold your napkin gracefully, and position it across your lap. Not tucked in. Tucking is for infants and Americans. The food arrives in an orderly procession. Eggs boiled to exactly the right degree of firmness. Toast stacked with military precision. Kippers that smell like a Dare coffee. Tea, and maybe, if you're especially daring, a glass of watered-down port. But beware. Each dish comes with its own set of unwritten rules. Toast, for example, must never be buttered directly on your plate. No, you must first transfer it to the side plate, butter it with a smooth, no-less motion, and never, ever let a crumb escape. Crumb management is an Olympic sport in Victorian households. Eggs are another hazard. Soft-boiled. Use your egg spoon. Not to be confused with the dessert spoon or the soup spoon. Tap the shell gently. No hammering, and never slurp. Slurping like coughing or laughing is considered a sign of moral decay. If you're served porridge, the stakes rise further. Stirring is allowed, but stirring with vigor implies you are either ravenous or of questionable upbringing. Elbows off the table, hands visible, but not waving. The correct posture is somewhere between a swan preparing for flight and a soldier standing at ease. And don't you dare reach. Reaching is social suicide. Instead, you ask for the butter in your calm's most dignified tone. Mother, might I trouble you for the butter? And wait patiently as it's passed through an obstacle course of family members and stern glances. Conversation, if permitted at all, must be subdued. No politics before noon. Certainly no discussion of illness, money, or anything resembling human bodily function. Weather is safe. Comments on the garden are welcome. If you run out of safe topics, simply nod sagely and pretend to contemplate the marmalade. Silence is better than a faux pas. And let's talk about utensils. Victorians have an entire arsenal at the ready. Butter knives, jam spoons, fish forks, toast racks, sugar tongs, each with a sacred purpose. Grab the wrong one, and you might as well announce you're running away to join the circus. The worst offense, using your fingers. Even toast, yes, toast must be handled delicately. Preferably with silver tongs or at least a handkerchief of sufficient thickness. Should you accidentally spill tea, drop a knife, or, God forbid, sneeze, the protocol is swift and merciless. Freeze, apologize softly, hope no one noticed, but everyone did. It will be mentioned again, probably during the next family argument or in your future memoirs. By the end of breakfast, you'll have used 7 different implements, answered 3 veiled questions about your plans for the day, and maintained perfect posture for what feels like a minor eternity. You will have eaten technically, but it won't feel nourishing. Instead, you'll leave the table with a stiff spine, a stiff upper lip, and a newfound respect for the simple glory of eating toast in bed. Elbows out, crumbs everywhere, and not a judgmental eyebrow in sight. That's Victorian breakfast. More exam than meal, more ordeal than indulgence, and you survived, at least until tomorrow. You need a bath, good luck. Public bathos are suspect, but bathing at home is dangerous. People worry water might excite the nerves. Soap is optional. Modesty is not congratulations. Your personal hygiene is about to become a social experiment. In Victorian England, cleaning yourself is less a routine and more a diplomatic mission, requiring equal parts stealth scheduling and the ability to withstand accusations of both moral decay and medical recklessness. It's Tuesday and you feel the urge to bathe. Not so fast. That urge alone is a sign you may have read too many French novels. Let's start with the basics. The public bathhouse, a place that should be simple, functional, and refreshing, has a reputation as a den of iniquity and questionable plumbing. No one respectable would be caught dead there unless they were either desperate or in disguise. The alternative, bathing at home, where the true dangers lurk. First, you must petition the household staff to prepare a bath, which involves boiling vast cauldrons of water, hauling them upstairs and pouring them into a heavy tin. Tub set in the middle of your freezing bedroom. By the time the tub is filled, it's been a 3-hour ordeal. The water's tepid and half the house now knows your business. But before you disrobe, let's talk about modesty. Privacy is nearly impossible. Changing behind a screen is essential, lest a maid wander in and glimpse an ankle. A scandal that will echo for years. You must also make sure the curtains are drawn, the door is locked, and the dog is firmly banished, because Victorians are convinced the family spaniel is plotting to reveal their secrets. Now soap. Soap is available. Yes, but it's a prickly, harsh thing that leaves your skin feeling like sandpaper and your nostrils filled with the scent of industrial optimism. Many people avoid it, claiming a good rub down with a dry towel is far healthier and less likely to unleash hidden passions, or worse, chill your vital organs. Cold, after all, is considered the root of all illness, which is why most baths are more like brief apologetic splashes with lukewarm water, followed by a vigorous toweling and possibly a quick prayer. Actual immersion, as in fully submerging yourself in water, is a rarity. Doctors warn it may weaken your constitution, especially if you are a woman, a child, or a gentleman of advanced years. Instead, Victorians develop a system of spot cleaning known as the strip wash. You undress in sections, never fully naked, that's just madness, and clean yourself bit by bit, like you're dusting off a priceless porcelain figurine. You start with the face, the most publicly visible part, followed by the hands, then possibly the neck and behind the ears if you're feeling wild. Anything further south is left to fate and dark-coloured clothing. For many, the preferred method is the dry bath, a liberal application of talcum powder, a stiff brush, and a strong belief in the power of positive thinking. After all, with enough powder, anything can be considered clean, including your conscience. And when in doubt, just spray yourself with the most floral scent available until you smell less like a person and more like a particularly nervous bouquet. Of course, these rules don't apply equally to everyone. The upper classes get away with weekly baths, while servants and labourers are advised to wash as infrequently as possible, lest the removal of grime make them vulnerable to disease or, even worse, look above their station. The less you wash, the more Victorian you become. So if you're feeling dirty, remember cleanliness is next to godliness, but too much cleanliness is suspicious, and if anyone asks, you were simply taking the air, brushing off the dust, or practicing restorative self-discipline. In the end, surviving Victorian hygiene is about balancing on a slippery, soapy tightrope, never too clean, never too dirty, and always ready with an excuse. Victorians were so scandalized by bare table legs that they covered them in little pantaloons, because nothing says decency like a dining room dressed more conservatively than you. Welcome to the golden age of furniture modesty, where even your side table is expected to have better manners than your second cousin at Christmas. Picture this. You're invited to a perfectly respectable Victorian dinner party. The silverware glistens, the candles flicker just so, and the only thing more lavish than the roast beef is the elaborate set of frills. Yes, frills adorning every piece of furniture in sight. It's not a party, unless the piano is in a petticoat. The fear of visible table legs was, to put it mildly, a collective national panic. A bare table leg in the wrong parlour could spark gossip, emotional fainting, and at least 3 letters to the editor. Why? Because leg sounded far too much like limb. And if you let your mind wander from table leg to human leg, well, that was a one-way ticket to social ruin. Even the word leg was considered risque in polite company. Euphemisms like support or pillar were deployed instead, as if furniture itself might take offence and go sulk in the conservatory. And so the Victorians went to war with the menace of unprotected furniture. If you were wealthy, you commissioned custom lace and velvet pantaloons for your tables and pianos, tiny trousers for inanimate objects. More budget-conscious families made do with ruffled doilies, crocheted skirts or whatever old curtain they could repurpose, No table went undressed. The sight of a single exposed table leg was considered so provocative that the truly cautious would cover chair legs as well, turning their dining room into a forest of fabric-clad timber. One can only imagine the anxiety caused by a breezy draught. Of course, this elaborate concealment led to complications. Cleaning became a full-time job. Imagine dusting and laundering not only your clothes, but also the entire contents of your dining room. Miss a single ruffle, and the household's reputation was in peril. Children grew up convinced that tables, like people, had modesty to lose and shame to bear. The family dog learned very quickly not to nap beneath the dinner table for fear of getting tangled in a sea of calico bloomers. The tradition wasn't limited to homes. Even public establishments felt the pressure. Hotels, tea shops, and railway refreshment rooms all adopted the custom, each competing to see whose furniture could be the most thoroughly chastened. There are even reports of furniture makers selling ready-made leg covers, complete with little buttoned flaps and, for the truly pious, discreet embroidery. The table wasn't just hidden, it was accessorized. Visitors from abroad found this all both baffling and hilarious. French travellers wrote snarky letters home describing the English passion for dressing their chairs. American tourists reportedly asked where they could buy trousers for their sideboards, presumably as souvenirs or for use at particularly uptight family gatherings back home. But there was a dark side to all this. Decorum. The drive to cover up legs sometimes went too far. One unlucky clergyman reportedly fainted at the sight of a new writing desk, entirely barren of modesty, its polished mahogany limbs gleaming shamelessly in the sunlight. The incident made the local paper and desk sales plummeted in that parish for months. Eventually, like all fads, the leg-covering craze began to fade, leaving behind a generation that could never quite look at a bare coffee table the same way again. Even today, somewhere deep in the Victorian subconscious, there's a little voice whispering, "Is that table naked?" So next time you plop your feet on the coffee table, remember, in another age, that would have required a full explanation, a sewing kit, and possibly a heartfelt apology to the furniture. Victorian England, where even your end tables were expected to have morals. You're invited to a parlour game. Sounds fun, until you realise it's a test of your wit, memory, and ability to fake enthusiasm for charades about Lord Byron's poetry. Welcome to the Victorian parlour, a lavishly upholstered arena where the only thing deadlier than the upholstery is the risk of public humiliation. The fire is crackling, the tea is tepid, and the furniture is safely covered in its modesty petticoats. You'll barely throw your second polite biscuit before someone, usually an aunt with suspiciously sharp eyes, suggests a game. There's no escape. You are about to be thrown headlong into the single most strenuous social obligation of the era, enforced fun. Parlour games in Victorian England are not about relaxation. They're a carefully orchestrated display of manners, cleverness, and the ability to pretend you care who wins. Every game comes with more rules than an international peace treaty. The evening begins with the minister's cat, a game so simple in theory and so stressful in practice that you'll be searching for the nearest fainting couch within minutes. One by one, you must describe the cat with an adjective in alphabetical order. The minister's cat is affable. The minister's cat is boisterous. By the time the minister's cat is quixotic, you're praying. Nobody asks you to spell it. If you're lucky, the group may decide to play charades, but don't get excited. This isn't modern charades. Victorian charades are less mime out a movie and more act out a cryptic 5-syllable word in multiple excruciating acts. The answer is always something like undercurrent or incomprehensible. There's a lot of standing around pretending to be an abstract concept while your audience looks politely baffled. Someone inevitably tries to act out by melancholy. It takes 3 rounds and ends with a discussion about proper poetic posture. Next up is consequences. Here each person writes down a part of a story. Who met whom, where and what happened. Then folds the paper and passes it along. The result is a narrative mess involving Queen Victoria, a butcher, the Crystal Palace, and a regrettable incident with a haddock. Everyone must read their sentence with the utmost seriousness, which only makes it harder not to snort tea through your nose. There's also forfeits, a game where the loser must perform a humiliating task dictated by the group. Recite a tongue twister, hop on one foot, or, most terrifying, declare your deepest affection for someone's handkerchief. Social stakes are high. The wrong joke can haunt you for seasons. If you lose repeatedly, expect your reputation to sink faster than an unbuttoned table leg at Sunday supper. And let's not forget Blind Man's Bluff, a game where the room is rearranged into a Victorian obstacle course. The blindfolded player lurches through priceless porcelain, over tripping hazards disguised as sets, and into the nearest family heirloom. Laughter is carefully measured. Too loud and you're unseemly. Too soft and you're ungracious. Someone always pretends to have sprained an ankle just to sit out the rest of the night. All of this fun is watched over by the silent, judgmental gaze of every family portrait and at least one guest who will recount your worst moment too. Half the town by next Tuesday. The trick is to never try too hard. Vulgar, but never look bored, rude. The goal is to shine, but only as much as the hostess's daughter and no more. By the end of the evening, you're exhausted. You've recited, acted, rhymed and survived the emotional roller coaster of being out. Foxed by a vice in 20 questions, you leave the parlour having gained nothing but new anxieties about the next invitation, and a haunting suspicion that someone saw you roll your eyes when the minister's cat came back around to Z. That's Victorian entertainment. Socially draining, gently mortifying, and always more work than it's worth. Fun, but only by decree. Walking in public is an obstacle course of rules. Stick to your class. Appropriate route. Avoid eye contact with strangers and never, under any circumstances, step in a puddle with the wrong foot. First, congratulations. You're about to leave the safety of your over-decorated Victorian sitting room and brave the unpredictable gauntlet that is the English street. Before you even touch the front doorknob, you must rehearse a mental checklist that would intimidate an airline pilot. Have you chosen the right hat? Are your gloves on straight? Is your posture telegraphing? Respectable citizen and not possible anarchist or loose relative. Good, because it's time for the public to judge you one cobblestone at a time. The moment you step out, your choice of sidewalk speaks volumes. The pavement is not a free-for-all. It's a social map. The best portion of the pavement, the driest, cleanest, farthest from runaway horses, is reserved for the upper crust. Should you, a mere merchant's son or a governess on her day off, wander too close to the elite section, expect glares so withering, you'll feel your collar, wilting in real time. Stick to your zone, walk at an approved pace, and for heaven's sake, do not dawdle. Loitering implies you have nowhere important to be, or worse, that you're up to mischief. both social crimes of the highest order. Then there's the matter of eye contact. Too much, and you risk appearing forward flirtatious, or most damning of all French. Too little, and people suspect you're either hiding something or sleepwalking. The safest course is to let your gaze drift politely somewhere between the third and fourth button on your own coat. If you happen to glimpse someone you know, deploy the smallest, most dignified nod imaginable. Smile only if you've been formally introduced, and even then only with your mouth, never with your teeth. Unleashing a full set of murs in public is practically a proposal of marriage. Street greetings are a science unto themselves. If you spot someone of higher social standing, you must tip your hat or perform a micro-curtsy, depending on your personal plumbing and wardrobe. However, tipping your hat to the wrong person, a butcher, a chimney sweep, or your neighbour's cousin who is merely passing through could spark a 3-week rumour about your mysterious motives. Best to err on the side of stony silence. Now the puddles. London is famous for many things: fog, scandals and puddles that range in size from inconvenient to biblical flood. Navigating this is an art. Never step in a puddle with your left foot first, unless you wish to be considered reckless. Splattering your hem is a sign of poor upbringing, and should you splash someone else, especially a lady in white muslin, prepare to be banished from tea invitations for the rest of the year. If you see someone about to step in a puddle, offer a hand only if you are certain of their social standing. Accidentally rescuing a social inferior is the stuff of serialized Victorian tragedy. Let's not forget the traffic. Carriages clatter past, street vendors bellow, and there is always at least one dog who seems to belong to everyone and no one. Crossing the street is a test of nerves, timing, and etiquette. Do not run vulgar, do not scuttle unladylike, and under no circumstances call out to someone across the road, unless you want to be mistaken for an opera singer or, worse, an American. Finally, should you encounter a parade, a funeral, or the Queen's carriage, the rules triple. Stand respectfully. Doff your hat and do not try to peer over taller heads. It's undignified. And besides, someone will likely report your elbows to the authorities. Surviving a single stroll in Victorian England is less about getting from point A to B, and more about maintaining dignity, decoding invisible social signals, and avoiding public humiliation. If you make it home with clean boots, an untarnished reputation, and only minor existential dread, you've done well, for in this era, even walking is a masterclass in keeping up appearances. Afternoon tea is not about hydration. It's a ritual with more unspoken rules than a royal wedding. Pour the milk at the wrong time, and you'll be discussed in hushed tones for weeks. Congratulations. You've been invited to afternoon tea in Victorian England, which means you now have the opportunity to ruin your social standing with one poorly timed scone. This is not a casual mug of something with a biscuit. This is a delicate performance of grace, timing and tableware, a ceremony designed to separate the wheat from the socially awkward chaff. First, let's talk about the setting. The drawing room is immaculate, heavy with the scent of over-perfumed roses and nervous anticipation. Cushions are arranged like tiny fortresses. The silver is polished to the point where you can see your own panicked reflection. Tea is served between 4 and 6, the most dangerous hours of the day because everyone is hungry, but no one is allowed to admit it. The ceremony begins with the arrival of the tea tray, accompanied by enough porcelain to launch a small war. Every piece has its own function. The teapot, the hot water jug, the milk jug never called a pitcher, the sugar bowl, the lemon dish, and a fleet of mismatched but socially approved cups and saucers. The teaspoons glint like the instruments of judgment that they are. You sit up straight, hands folded neatly in your lap legs at precisely the right angle to avoid indecency, or, heaven forbid, comfort. The hostess offers tea. Your reply must be gracious, but not over-eager. Accept too quickly, and you seem greedy. Too slowly, and you appear ungrateful. Once served, the real anxiety begins. What do you add first? The endless debate between milk first and tea first is enough to fracture families. Tradition says the milk goes in after the tea, but some rebels and the French do otherwise. Pour milk first, and the room will go quiet, as if someone's just confessed to Lassen. Next, sugar. Victorian sugar cubes are not just for sweetness. They're for demonstrating manual dexterity and moral fortitude. Drop the cube in without splashing. Stir with small silent circles. Do not clink the spoon against the cup, unless you want a stern lecture from your aunt. Lemon is acceptable, but never with milk. Mixing both is said to cause storms, plagues, and possibly hauntings. Now the food. The three-tiered tray is loaded with tiny sandwiches, scones and pastries, each requiring its own etiquette. Start with sandwiches, always with the crusts cut off, filled with things that are barely food, like cucumber and a whisper of butter. Scones are next, and here lies another minefield. Do you put the jam or the cream first? Choose wisely, as entire counties will judge you for getting this wrong. Some say jam, first the Cornish way, others swear by cream, first the Devon way. Either choice will make you an enemy for life. Eating is an exercise in restraint. Take small bites. Never wolf down a scone in one go. Never lick your fingers, or worse, use your sleeve. If a crumb escapes, ignore it stoically. Napkin dabbing is allowed, but only at the corners of the mouth. Loud chewing is basically a declaration of war. Conversation at tea is another labyrinth. Acceptable topics include the weather, the latest literary sensation, or for the especial brave, the peculiarities of your host's cat. Under no circumstances mention politics, bodily ailments, or, most treacherous of all, the scandals of previous teas. And remember, under no circumstances should you ever slurp. The sound of slurping is considered so offensive it may be grounds for exile by the end. Your nerves are frayed, your stomach half full, and your reputation delicately balanced on whether you remembered to pass the sugar bowl clockwise. You leave the table exhausted, with a smile plastered on your face and a vow never to judge anyone for using a tea bag again. Victorian afternoon tea, where hydration is optional, but anxiety is always served piping hot. Someone died. Time to wear black for a year. Avoid all parties and express your grief using only monotone colours and the correct type of bonnet. Congratulations. You've now graduated from the ordinary struggles of daily Victorian etiquette to the Olympics of emotional restraint. Mourning. In the Victorian era, grief isn't just a private feeling. It's a full-time job with a uniform, a schedule, and the ever-present threat of social scandal if you mourn incorrectly. Funerals aren't merely an end, they're the start of a months-long fashion show. Except, instead of dazzling in new attire, your goal is to look like you've just emerged from the world's dreary laundry basket. Step 1. Wardrobe transformation. Upon hearing of a family death, your closet is immediately purged of colour and hope. Out come the layers of black crepe, jet beads and dresses so heavy you could use them to stop a runaway carriage. Everything must be black, shiny black, matte black, black so deep it absorbs sunlight and optimism. If you're lucky enough to be a widow, you get the special treat of widows. Weeds. Outfits that combine ferial style with the comfort of a portable personal sauna. These ensembles usually come with a veil, because nothing says I'm grieving, like stumbling into furniture in semi-darkness for 12 months straight. Step 2. Time. Management morning isn't a take a few days off work situation. Full morning for a close relative can last up to 2 years, and there's a strict schedule for how you're allowed to feel. The first stage, deep mourning, means absolute black. No jewelry except jet, and no visits to anything more exciting than the local cemetery. The second stage, half mourning, allows for greys and purples. Yes, purple is considered a wild emotional leap. Move too quickly into colour, and you'll have neighbours questioning your love for the deceased. Move too slowly, and people wonder if you're being dramatic. There's a sweet spot, but nobody knows exactly where it is. Step 3. Social withdrawal. Parties, balls, and even small gatherings are strictly forbidden. Laughter is risky. Smiling is suspicious. If you're caught enjoying a single bite of sponge cake at the wrong time, expect at least 3 strongly worded letters and a week of icy stares. If you must leave the house, prepare for a gauntlet of mournful nods and the occasional relative reciting poetry about loss in the cheese. Mourning is performance art, and the audience is everywhere. Even your home gets in on the act. Mirrors are covered, so you don't accidentally glimpse your own face and risk a smile. Clocks might be stopped, curtains drawn, and the piano closed for business. If someone shows up unannounced, you must greet them in your most sombre, faintly haunted voice, as though you just stepped out of a Gothic novel. Flowers only, lies, and other monochromatic choices. Even the family dog seems to sigh with extra gloom. Of course, no period of mourning would be complete without mourning accessories. Victorians popularized everything from mourning brooks, tiny portraits of the dearly departed encased in jet and often accompanied by a lock of hair, to black-bordered stationery. Imagine writing thank you notes for a casserole, delivery while reminding everyone through envelope design that you are absolutely still devastated. All of this, naturally, is overseen by the town's resident mourning expert, that one great aunt who hasn't worn colour since the Crimean War and can spot a shiny button at 50 paces. She will remind you of every rule, correct your posture at the grave, and raise an eyebrow at the cut of your veil. She is both the judge and the jury in the emotional gymnastics of Victorian grief. By the end, you'll have mastered the art of suffering with style, enduring endless months of wardrobe monotony and polite, relentless observation, Victorian mourning. It's less about loss and more about proving you can follow the strictest social script in history while barely daring to crack a smile. Want to visit a friend? Don't knock. Instead, leave a calling card with exactly the right size, font and flourish. The wrong card means social exile and possibly being haunted by etiquette ghosts. Welcome to the labyrinthine world of Victorian social networking, where even the humble act of dropping by a neighbour's house is a diplomatic operation requiring nerves of steel, a steady hand and a miniature paper portfolio that could topple a small government. Before you even leave the house, you must arm yourself with a stack of calling cards, crisp, unblemished, and as heavily regulated as an 1890s railway timetable. The first rule: never underestimate the power of paper. A calling card is more than an introduction. It's your entire social resume, compressed into 3 122 in of pasteboard. Too large and you appear desperate for attention. Too small, and people assume you have something to hide. The font should be dignified, nothing flashy, nothing continental, and absolutely no whimsical serifs. That hint: you might enjoy a good joke if your signature is illegible. Congratulations, you've just established yourself as a person of mystery, or possibly as someone to avoid at all costs. Before setting out, you must also choose the correct card case: ivory, silver, mother of pearl. Each signals your station and your taste. There are card cases for morning visits, afternoon teas, and even funerals. God help you if you show up to a morning house with your jolly summer motif on display. Now for the ritual itself. Upon arrival at your intended recipient's home, do not approach the door yourself. That's for people with nothing left to lose. Instead, hand your calling card to the household servant who, depending on your social standing, will either pass it on immediately or let it languish in a porcelain tray for days. If your card is accepted, you might eventually receive an invitation to call in person. If it's declined, or worse, ignored entirely, you'll know you've committed a grievous fauna, perhaps by using the wrong kind of border or by folding the card at an inappropriate angle. Speaking of folding, there is a whole sub-language of card bending. A folded corner means you delivered it personally, folded lengthwise, and it's a condolence call. Folded at the top, it's a business visit. If you forget to fold or fold in the wrong direction, you might as well pack your bags and take up residence in the moors, and beware the deadly error of embellishment: scented cards, unforgivably forward, colourful ink, outrageous, monogrammed in gold. You're either royalty or about to be investigated for fraud. The safest card is as bland as dry toast. Its only decoration a faintly hopeful watermark. Now let's talk about the politics of reciprocation. If you receive a calling card, you must respond in kind. Ignore a card, and you risk being blacklisted from every garden party between Bath and Blackpool. The speed of your response is everything. Too soon, and you seem overeager. Too late, and you'll be labelled a recluse, or even worse, an eccentric. There are written guides for every contingency. Who gets priority? How long before you escalate from card to letter? When is it safe to send an invitation to dinner? Even the display of calling cards inside the home is an exercise in social stratification. The silver tray in the hallway serves as a public record of your popularity. Woe betide you if your tray is empty. Visitors will whisper, and servants will gossip. Some families reportedly borrowed extra cards from friends to pad out their trays, because in Victorian England the illusion of being in demand was almost as important as the reality. By the end of the day, you may have visited 5 homes and spoken to no one, but rest assured, you've participated in the great paper chase that keeps Victorian society running. It's networking by way of origami, and failure means vanishing from polite society faster than a badly folded invitation. Victorian calling cards, because sometimes the difference between belonging and social oblivion is a tiny rectangle of cardboard, and knowing exactly when, where and how to leave it. Forget texting. In Victorian England, flowers did the talking, accidentally. Hand someone a yellow carnation and you might ruin a friendship. Give a fern and you're basically proposing marriage. Welcome to the world's most complicated bouquet, where every petal and stem is loaded with meaning, and one misplaced bloom could trigger social chaos. The Victorians, ever suspicious of direct communication, developed the language of flowers, a sprawling, passive, aggressive codebook that turned innocent floral arrangements into emotional hand grenades. Every major household had at least one volume of FL orography, usually sandwiched between the Bible and an etiquette manual, thicker than a tea tray. Let's begin with the basics. Want to express gratitude. A pink rose will do jealousy, that's yellow. Hyacinth, a white lily, says I'm pure, but possibly on my way out. And if you really want to complicate someone's afternoon, send a bouquet of marolds, which translates roughly to I'm thinking about you, but not in a good way. No need for angry texts. Just let the flowers do the snubbing. Of course, nothing was ever simple. Each color, each shade, and even the number of flowers could change the meaning. 2 red roses together meant marry me. 3 meant I'm needy. 4, let's never speak again. This system, naturally, was a social minefield. There were entire subplots to Victorian novels that began with someone misreading a bouquet and ended with jewels at dawn, or at least a very tense garden party. Even the act of receiving flowers was fraught with peril, except with both hands and a smile, and you're sending encouragement except too quickly, and you're desperate. Leave the bouquet in a visible place and everyone assumes you're broadcasting its message. Hide it behind a vase and you're quietly plotting revenge. Forget to water it, and you've insulted 3 generations. Gentlemen, meanwhile, lived in terror of making a floral faux pas. Imagine, you're a young suitor, finally invited to tea, your hands clammy as you present your carefully chosen arrangement. The hostess smiles until she spots the offending yellow. Carnation instantly whispers, fill the room. He sent a symbol of rejection. That's the Victorian equivalent of accidentally texting your crush new phone. Who dissed? But it wasn't all heartbreak and scandal. Sometimes the floral language was used for clandestine communication. Lovers who couldn't risk a public word would leave coded messages in the conservatory, a sprig of rosemary for remembrance, violets for loyalty, or an ivy leaf for cling to me. Housewives, desperate to avoid another dull dinner party, might accidentally display a bunch of basil symbolizing hatred, just to watch the reaction from across the table. There were, of course, experts, usually elderly aunts or meddling neighbours who prided themselves on decoding every bouquet. Did you see what Lady Beneath left on the reactor's doorstep? Daisies and foxglove. I give it a month before the scandal breaks. For some, flower arranging was less about beauty and more about declaring war. If you thought texting could be misinterpreted, imagine a world where your social life hinges on the subtle placement of baby's breath or the strategic omission of a violet. The anxiety was endless. Florists did a brisk business in emergency substitutions, quietly swapping out disastrous messages for safer choices. Are you sure you want to send monkshood, madam? That's a death threat. In the end, the language of flowers was the perfect Victorian pastime. Complicated, coded, and always one step away from full-blown emotional disaster. If you got it right, you could woo, propose, or diplomatically escape a family dinner. Get it wrong, and you'd spend weeks repairing friendships, or worse, explaining yourself to a committee of flower-obsessed relatives. So next time you pick up a bouquet, Remember, in Victorian England, a bunch of daisies could launch a romance, end a friendship, or start a minor feud, all before the tea went cold. The modern read receipt has nothing on a well-timed pose. Welcome to the Victorian workplace, where the biggest threat isn't spam. It's a supervisor who judges your penmanship and the exact angle of your ink. Well, you stroll into the office. Actually, you shuffle in because you're still not sure if the shoes or your soul are more worn down. The air is thick with the scent of ink, coal dust and suppressed ambition. There's no cheery ping of new messages, no notifications, and no hope of a mark. All as red button. The Victorian office runs on paper sweat and the constant, chilling knowledge that Mr. Humphrey from accounts is watching you like a disappointed Parnell. Your desk, if you're lucky enough to have one, is a masterpiece of organisation. Not your organisation, mind you, but the precise, soul-flattening arrangement dictated by centuries of tradition. The inkwell must sit at a 45-degree angle from your dominant hand. Too close and you're presumptuous. Too far and you're clearly a dreamer with poor boundaries. Your lot is monogrammed, but not ostentatiously so. Heaven forbid. You bring in a fountain pen with a foreign name. People might think you're plotting industrial espionage or, worse, French spelling. Before you even write a word, you're expected to perform an intricate ballet of bows, nods and mumbled greetings. The hierarchy is as rigid as a starched collar. You must greet the supervisor first, but not too cheerfully. Greet your colleagues, but never suggest friendship, unless you wish to be the subject of office gossip and possibly a cautionary ballad. Anyone caught chatting before noon will be considered either a revolutionary or a future poet, equally dangerous. In this environment, the day's main activity is correspondence, and by correspondence, I mean the art of copying letters by hand in a script so immaculate that a single blot might trigger a formal investigation. Typing hasn't yet invaded most offices, so your ability to flourish a capital G is your only chance at advancement. If you're a clear, you might be lucky enough to operate a mechanical letter copying press, which involves pressing damp tissue paper to inked originals until you've achieved a faint but legible ghost of the document. Get it wrong, and your entire week is spent recopying the annual turnip. Inventory. Meetings are announced by the ringing of a bell, followed by everyone shuffling to a conference table so narrow it resembles a Victorian punishment device. There, the manager reads out memos in a monotone designed to sap the will to live. The topics ink budgets, the new ledger ruling, and if things really get wild, where the coffee is making the junior staff too spirited. Lunch break is a minefield. There's no fridge for leftovers, just a lukewarm pork pie wrapped in a handkerchief. You must eat in silence, with minimal chewing and certainly no laughter. Eating an orange at your desk is considered an act of anarchy. Someone always brings in a hard-boiled egg, which, when peeled, will become the center of office controversy for at least 3 weeks. Office equipment is both a blessing and a curse. The filing cabinet is locked, and only Mr. Humphrey has the key, which he guards with the vigilance of a medieval dragon. The ledger is sacred, and any mistake must be sanded out with a rubber so expensive you sign it out like royal jewelry. If you spill ink, you must file a formal apology, possibly in triplicate. And of course, the greatest threat is the suggestion box, an ominous wooden chest lurking by the door. No one ever admits to using it, but occasionally a rumor surfaces that someone suggested an extra 15 minutes for lunch. That person is never seen again. by the time the gas lamps flicker to life. You've written, copied, erased, and apologized more times than you've blinked. You leave the office with cramped fingers, a haunted stare, and a deep, abiding gratitude that no one has ever asked you to reply. All Victorian office life, endless paper, relentless judgment, and no escape from Mr. Humphrey's beady, watchful eye. Picking out clothes takes hours, and not just because of the layers. There are strict rules for fabrics, colours, and when you're allowed to wear stripes without being accused of moral laxity. In Victorian England, getting dressed isn't a personal choice. It's a community project, a logic puzzle, and sometimes an act of spiritual endurance. You don't simply open your closet and grab whatever's clean. Your wardrobe is an elaborate menu of options, each with its own code, calendar, and invisible pitfalls. To start, there's the question of season. Not is it warm or cold, but what does society expect my knees to feel today? Summer means 3 layers, winter 5 layers, 2 petticoats and a shawl heavy enough to stop a runaway carriage. The fabric is your first hurdle. Linen is for summer, but only before noon. Velvet is for evening, unless you're under 30, in which case velvet is too ambitious. Wool is always correct except when it isn't, and cotton is considered mildly subversive. If you're a man, broadcloth and tweed are safe bets, but beware the scandal of 2 bright waistcoats. Yellow, for example, can only be worn by children and the terminally optimistic. Too much silk, and you're either a libertine or a diplomat, possibly both. Then the colour wheel. Black is reserved for mourning or for servants who want to look invisible. White is for the pure, the unmarried, or those hoping to startle their neighbours. Blue, thankfully, is allowed, but only in the right shade and only after widened tide and green. Proceed with caution, as it may suggest Irish sympathies, woodland mischief, or simply that you've lost your mind. There are entire books dedicated to the perils of purple regal if you're a duchess, presumptuous if you're a dentist. Next, the pattern trap stripes are especially fraught. Vertical stripes can make you look tall and severe, which is good for funerals and bad for picnics. Horizontal stripes, on the other hand, are only for the nautical and the foolhardy. Plaids are Scottish, unless worn in London, where they are suspiciously provincial. Polka dots are for the very young or the very French, and florals must never be larger than a modest thumbnail, unless you're attending a garden party. In which case the more, the merrier, but only on Thursdays. Accessories are a chapter unto themselves. Gloves are compulsory, but not just any gloves. They must be the right material for the event and the right length for the hour. Wear gloves indoors and people think you're cold-blooded outdoors without them, and you're one step from anarchy. Hats are a minefield. Bonnets, bowlers, top hats, bores, fascinators. Each signals your mood, your wealth, and your willingness to risk ridicule. The wrong hat at the wrong event can destroy a reputation before the tea has even been poured. And jewellery are jewellery. Pearls are tasteful. Diamonds are for the married and wealthy. And anything with too much sparkle after 400 p.m. suggests you're either in mourning or in denial. Cameos, lockets and mourning brooches are always safe, provided you aren't accidentally wearing the wrong relative's hair. The worst part, none of this is written down anywhere convenient. Most rules are delivered via rumour, sideways glances, or that one neighbour who never seems to blink. By the time you're finally dressed, corseted, gloved, buttoned, pinned and swaddled in enough fabric to reupholster the settee, you've missed breakfast and are dangerously, close to violating at least 2 unspoken rules, and that's before you even reach the street where every stranger is ready to mentally score your ensemble. So, if you're ever tempted to roll your eyes at the modern dress code, just remember, the Victorians turned getting dressed into an Olympic event where the only gold you won was judgment. Fashion may come and go, but in Victorian England, the rules and the layers were forever. Victorian children are basically ornamental. They must be presentable, quiet, and only speak when spoken to, preferably in full sentences and never about bodily functions. From the moment a Victorian child emerges into the world, preferably in a private nursery with wallpaper, so busy it could trigger vertigo, they are immediately groomed for their one true job, appearing calm, clean, and utterly unremarkable in public. Childhood in this era is not about self-discovery, but about learning how to sit perfectly still on a hard chair for what feels like years without uttering a sound, louder than a distant cough. Mornings begin with the ceremonial donning of the children's outfit, an ensemble that includes so many buttons, bows and starched ruffles that the average 7-year-old spends the first quarter of the day simply being fastened into existence. Shoes must be polished to a mirror shine. Hair must be parted so straight it could double as a railway track. Anything less than perfection invites the sort of maternal sigh that could wither even the cheeriest daffodil. Breakfast is a silent, high-stakes affair. Victorian children eat at their own little table, carefully supervised by a nurse or a governess, whose main role is to enforce the rules of table etiquette and discourage any giggling, fidgeting, or unsanctioned jam application. Speaking is allowed only if it's about the weather, the improvement of one's penmanship, or a keen observation about the punctuality of the family. Cat topics like mud, insects, or digestive processes are strictly taboo. Save those for when you've escaped to the garden, out of earshot of every adult and at least one suspicious spaniel. Education is the central pillar of the Victorian childhood, but don't imagine colourful classrooms or hands-on science experiments. No, lessons are stern, silent, and always supervised. Recitations are performed standing up back straight, eyes down and hands folded. The greatest academic achievement is not getting an answer right, but remembering to say please miss or thank you ma'am before and after every syllable. If you show too much enthusiasm for sums or Latin declensions, you risk being marked as precocious, which is only slightly better than being considered troublesome. When guests come to call, children are summoned like rare, fragile curiosities. You stand beside your mother in the parlour, introduced in a tone reserved for expensive crockery, and are expected to recite your name, your age, and perhaps a line or two from Wordsworth. Under no circumstances should you mention your pet frog, the time you fell in the duck pond, or the elaborate system of tunnels you've been digging beneath the rose bushes. Playtime, such as it is, happens under careful supervision. Outdoor games are allowed, but only if they won't scuff shoes or raise voices above an elegant murmur. Indoors, you may quietly assemble wooden blocks, solve intricate puzzles, or learn embroidery. If you must play tag, it should be at a stately, dignified pace, and no one should ever get grass stains. Victorian discipline is an art form, more whispered warnings and arched eyebrows than actual punishments. Being sent to the naughty chair is a fate worse than bread, pudding for supper. Public tantrums are vanishingly rare. Children learn early that one raised voice can lead to days of being ignored, tutted at, or, worst of all, having your storybook privileges revoked. And so the Victorian child perfects the art of silence, poise and strategic invisibility. Behind closed doors, of course, they are as wild and rambunctious as any other generation, dreaming of mud pies, shrieking with forbidden laughter and daring each other to, say, bottom at the dinner table. But in public, they are model citizens, pristine, polite, and almost entirely silent. If your own kids ever forget their inside voices, just remember, at least you don't have to lace them into 47 buttons before breakfast. Victorian parenting, where children are seen, not heard, and never, ever sticky. You want to date hope. You enjoy supervised walks, cryptic glances and conversations about the weather. Kissing before engagement only if you want to be sent to a remote convent. Welcome to the delicate ballet of Victorian romance, where Cupid needs a chaperone and your love life depends on the subtle art of not saying anything remotely interesting. In an era terrified of impropriety, courtship is less about passion and more about performing emotional origami, folding your true feelings into gestures so restrained that the average houseplant would appear brazen by comparison. The adventure begins with the art of the introduction. No one just walks up and says hello. First, a mutual acquaintance, preferably with impressive facial hair, must vouch for your character. Once introduced, you may exchange pleasantries in the presence of at least 2 adults and possibly a potted fern. The conversation must stick to the safest of topics. Splendid weather we're having. How is your mother's neuralgia? And did you hear about the new type of marmalade at Fordham? Anything spicier is strictly forbidden. Once you have been deemed suitable company, you may be permitted a supervised promenade. This means walking slowly, never briskly down a busy avenue or in the family garden, trailed by a vigilant aunt whose sole purpose is to ensure your elbows remain at least 3 in apart. Glances are allowed, but only if they're brief and quickly disguised as bird-watching. Prolonged eye contact is considered a scandal in the making and may result in the sudden appearance of another ant. Physical contact is, of course, out of the question. Even brushing hands by accident can set the local rumour mill working into overdrive. Should your fingers actually touch, the only recourse is to apologise profusely, change the subject, and possibly consider leaving the country for a while. If you absolutely must pass something, a letter, a parasol, a biscuit do so with as much distance and sanity as possible. The passing of a handkerchief can carry the emotional weight of a modern-day proposal. Letter, writing is where Victorian romance truly flourishes. Forget texts and emojis. Love is declared in 10-page epistles, written by candlelight, with as many literary references as possible. Each letter is vetted by an older relative, or, failing that, by a neighbour with strong opinions about punctuation. Any hint of passion must be buried beneath layers of metaphor. Adore you become. I find our mutual appreciation of cloud formations deeply gratifying. If your handwriting is too ornate, it's considered flamboyant. Too plain and you lack depth, it's a miracle anyone ever got married at all. Once an understanding is reached, usually after months of ambiguous compliments and several near faintings, things speed up dramatically. Parents are summoned, contracts are discussed, the chaperone is upgraded to full-time surveillance, and finally the engagement. A flurry of formal visits, handshakes and the rare but powerful public smile. But beware, break any rule and the consequences are severe. Stolen kiss before engagement is a disaster. You'll be shipped off to the country where you'll spend your days embroidering moral lessons onto handkerchiefs and repenting with only the family. Goat. For company, gentlemen risk being challenged to a duel or worse, being cut from the social calendar altogether. Once engaged, things relax a little. You may now sit together in a room with the door partially open, provided everyone else is awake and within shouting distance. You may exchange gifts, as long as they're small, practical, and not suggestive novels or poetry, just to be safe. And so if you're dreaming of candle-lit dinners and midnight rendezvous, temper your expectations. Victorian courtship is less whirlwind romance and more synchronized swimming above the surface, all poise and dignity beneath it, frantic paddling and the occasional existential crisis. In this era, the path to love is long, winding, and always heavily supervised. Owning a pet is fashionable, but your dog is expected to be as well behaved as your aunt's prized fern. Don't let it bark, shed or display enthusiasm in public. Welcome to Victorian England, where pet ownership is a delicate performance of dignity, restraint, and the unspoken terror of accidental fur on your cravat. Every proper household must have a pet, a living, breathing sign of both prosperity and emotional repression. But don't be fooled into thinking your animal companion can act like an animal. Victorian pets, much like Victorian children, are to be seen but not heard, and certainly never smelt. Let's start with the most popular pet, the dog. The fashionable breeds of the day. King Charles, Spaniels, Pugs and Terriers with names like Lord Buttercup are all expected to exhibit the stoic patience of a retired butler. These dogs are brushed within an inch of their lives, perfumed with lavender water and adorned with ribbons so frilly. Even the family baby feels underdressed. Walking your dog is not a romp in the park, but a prominent of social display. Your dog must move at precisely your pace, tail at the approved angle, with no unseemly sniffing, tail chasing, or, heaven forbid, barking at a passing carriage. If your spaniel so much as chuffs, Aunt Prunella will write about it in her diary for the next 6 months. Cats too are rising in popularity, but with strict expectations. A cat is allowed to nap in the sunbeam, purr demurely, and occasionally chase a moth for the amusement of assembled guests. Under no circumstances should your cat climb the drapes or knock over the bone. China litter boxes are a well-guarded secret, usually disguised as a tasteful piece of furniture, because nothing spoils afternoon tea like the faint suggestion of feline improperly. But dogs and cats are just the beginning. The truly eccentric Victorian might keep a parrot, a canary, or even a hedgehog. Birds are permitted to sing softly, melodiously, and at appropriate hours. Only. A parrot's vocabulary is strictly curated to exclude anything resembling political opinion or family gossip. A hedgehog, on the other hand, is prized for its quiet nocturnal dignity. No sudden movements, no embarrassing odour. If your hedgehog should roll into a ball at the wrong time, be prepared to offer a lengthy apology and possibly a round of port. Pet accessories are an entire industry. There are bespoke feeding bowls, hand-stitched coats, and monogrammed beds that rival those of the human residents. But don't overdo it. A dog in a diamond collar is a target for both thieves and social critics, who will loudly question whether you value your pet's comfort over your own. Sense of shame. Pet etiquette manuals abound. You are advised to socialize your animal with a series of carefully orchestrated introductions. No lunging, No licking and certainly no jumping up on a guest, unless you want to be the topic of next Sunday's sermon. Should your pet disgrace itself in any way, the protocol is swift. Scoop up the animal, apologize to the room and banish both it and yourself to reflect on your failings. There are rumours of a London club exclusively for owners whose pets have caused public scandals. Meetings are held discreetly and names are never shared outside the group. Of course, the greatest challenge is keeping your animal's enthusiasm in check. Victorian pets must never appear too joyful. Wagging tails, ecstatic purring and playful antics are to be limited to private moments. Ideally after dusk with the curtains drawn. In public, your pet should be as dignified as a family portrait and at least as dust-free. So next time your dog barks at the mail carrier or your cat knocks over a vase, take heart. At least you don't have to pen an apology to your entire social circle or schedule your animal's daily walk around the neighbour's nap time. In the Victorian era, pet ownership was a delicate balance of pride, performance and perpetual fear that your animal would upstage you with a single, unsanctioned sneeze. Christmas is technically allowed, but only if your tree is properly modest and no one laughs too loudly. Remember, merit is undignified unless it's silent. The Victorian holiday season is a masterclass in controlled festivity, a time when joy is allowed, but only if thoroughly laundered, pressed and wrapped in a muffler. Gone are the wild medieval feasts and rowdy rebels. Instead, you find yourself invited to a mental celebration, where every ounce of enthusiasm must pass through a filter of etiquette and mild, dignified disappointment. It all starts with decorations. Yes, the Victorians popularized the Christmas tree, but before you imagine twinkling lights and glittering bliss, adjust your expectations. Your tree must be of a respectable height, no more than 5 ft, please, and decorated with homemade paper ornaments. A strand or two of sombre ribbon and the occasional orange impaled on a sprig of holly. Too much colour or sparkle, and the vicar may stop by to ask pointed questions about the state of your soul. Candles are allowed, but only if they're the non-dripping, non-flickering, extremely safe kind and ideally not lit at all. The exchange of gifts is similarly restrained. Presents are practical, unostentatious, and ideally involve a great deal of wool. Socks, handkerchiefs, sensible books, and perhaps a modest tin of boiled sweets if you're feeling extravagant. Anything that requires batteries or makes a noise is regarded with deep suspicion and possibly labelled as French. Recipients must display the exact right amount of gratitude, enthusiastic, but never giddy. Smiling broadly is acceptable only if you immediately neutralize it with a quiet thank you and a thoughtful nod. Food is a highlight, but it's less about indulgence and more about tradition. The Christmas goose arrives, roasted to perfection and carved with the enmity of a royal decree. Plum pudding is wheeled in, doused with brandy and ignited, but the flames must never rise above polite applause height. Any cries of delight should be muffled in linen napkins. Crackers, those little tubes of holiday mischief exist, but their jokes are strictly censored and should not provoke actual laughter. A modest H, or indeed will do. Games and music are allowed, but with rules. Charades are popular, provided no one acts out anything so vulgar as an emotion. Carol singing is tolerated, but only in keys that don't encourage excitement. Any attempt to dance will be met with raised eyebrows and, if you're unlucky, a note from your mother reminding you of the family's delicate constitution. Even Santa Claus, imported from Germany and America, is given a Victorian makeover. He is to be discussed with the same reverence reserved for a foreign diplomat, admired from a distance, spoken of in the vaguest terms, and never depicted in public without his full winter attire and a distinctly serious beard. Let's not forget New Year's. While a fresh start is theoretically celebrated, it is mostly marked by making lists of modest improvements, dust parlour more thoroughly, express gratitude with greater restraint. Midnight is acknowledged by quietly checking the mantel clock, followed by a handshake and, if spirits are high, a single glass of cherry. For those lucky or unlucky enough to host a holiday gathering, the stakes are even higher. Invitations must be handwritten in sombre ink, decorations modest, conversation meticulously neutral, and refreshments plentiful, but never excessive. If a guest so much as utters a pun, hosts are obliged to respond with a cool smile and a quick change of subject. So as you contemplate your next holiday, be grateful for a little chaos, laughter, and unruly tinsel. In Victorian England, the true miracle of the season is managing to celebrate anything at all, quietly, modestly, and with maximum restraint. Ferment is permitted, but only if you keep it down. You need to visit the facilities. There's a special way to ask. Anything more direct would invite scandal and possibly lower your property value. Welcome to the delicate world of Victorian restroom etiquette, a minefield of euphemisms, delicate hints, and the ever-present fear of being too obvious about your bodily needs. In this society, the body is something you pretend not to have, especially when nature calls. So if you find yourself in urgent need, you're about to embark on the most carefully choreographed performance of your social life. Let's begin at a dinner party. You're seated between Lady Farthering and a colonel who once ate a hard-boiled egg in silence for 45 minutes. The meal is a marathon, multiple courses, endless toasts and rivers of tea. As the pressure mounts, you begin to wonder, how on earth does anyone excuse themselves without causing a minor scandal? The answer: subtext and subterfuge. You do not under any circumstances announce your intentions. No one says, "I'm off to the L. Where's the bathroom?" or, "Heaven forbid, nature calls." Instead, the proper phrasing is, "Would you excuse me for a moment? I must see about a matter of some urgency," or for the truly refined, "I should like to freshen up." Anything more specific is grounds for immediate social exile and perhaps a stern letter from your landlord. If you're in someone's home, the facilities themselves are shrouded in secrecy. The guest powder room is located at the end of a long corridor, behind a velvet curtain, next to a potted plant with an expression of eternal embarrassment. Some country estates still rely on chamber pots tucked discreetly behind folding screens, and woe betide the guest who discovers this fact after 3 glasses of sherry. The staff know where everything is, of course, but asking a servant directly would be akin to demanding they read your diary aloud at the table. For men, public convenience is slightly easier. Gentlemen's clubs and railway stations offer retiring, rooms where the only challenge is maintaining a stiff upper lip and avoiding eye contact at all costs. For women, the situation is far more perilous. The ladies' retiring room is a sanctuary of indirect conversation, elaborate hat adjustment, and very little actual plumbing. Women often travel in pairs not for safety, but for plausible deniability. We are simply going to powder our noses. If one actually needs to use the facilities, the process is an elaborate dance of unbuttoning, rearranging, and hoping no one notices the sudden absence of lace. Once inside, further rules await. Victorians prized privacy so highly that even bathroom doors were padded to muffle incriminating noises. The chamber pot is to be used with discretion, emptied by invisible hands and spoken of only in the vaguest terms, if at all. Flushing, when available, is to be done quietly, with the chain pulled as softly as humanly possible, lest it alert the entire household to your most recent activity. Returning to the party requires equal tact. No one should ever suspect where you've been. Pause at the mirror, adjust your gloves, and re-enter the room as if you've been admiring the view from a distant window. If anyone asks rare but possible, the answer is always, I was detained by the most charming view of the garden, or I had to attend to a small correspondence. Everyone nods and the fiction is maintained. Children are indoctrinated. Early Victorian potty training consists mostly of learning to ask for the necessary with grave seriousness and to avoid ever speaking of it again. Accidents are met with horror and, in the case of the upper classes, quickly rewritten out of family history. So, next time you marvel at modern plumbing and the freedom to say back in a minute, remember. In Victorian England, even the most basic human urge required a script, a supporting cast, and nerves of steel. Potty training wasn't just for children. It was a lifelong social performance, and only the most refined could pull it off. Every occasion has a designated hat. Get it wrong and risk social ruin, or at the very least a strongly worded letter from your neighbour. In Victorian England, hats are more than mere accessories. They are silent declarations of identity, wealth, marital status, and whether you understand the difference between a garden stroll and a state funeral. Every closet contains a bewildering array of headgear: bonnets, bowlers, boars, top hats, trilbies, fascinators, and things that look like they might once have been small animals. The only thing more dangerous than a bare head is choosing the wrong hat for the occasion. Let's start with the basics. A respectable lady owns at least a dozen bonnets. Straw for the country, velvet for the city, black crepe for mourning, and the mysteriously large bonnet for moments, when she'd like to avoid conversation altogether. Feathers, ribbons, flowers, and the occasional taxidermy bird are carefully arranged by milliners who charge by the inch. But beware, a feather out of season can set the whole parish gossiping. Too many ribbons. People will think you're trying too hard, not enough. Clearly you've given up. There's an unspoken consensus that any hat with more than 2 moving parts is a cry for help. For gentlemen, hats are badges of honour. The top hat reigns, supreme, an improbable tower of felt that announces you as a man of means, or at least one determined to look taller. The bowler hat is for clerk and city men, while the flat cap marks you as a man of the people, or possibly someone who has opinions about sheep. Woe betide the man who wears a straw boater to an evening event, or worse, dons his cap indoors. Such lapses can lead to heated debates in drawing rooms and even polite shunning at the groceries. Hats are regulated not only by social class, but by time of day. Morning hats are practical and subdued. Think tweed and sensible brim. Afternoon hats are for showing off. Evening hats, when permitted, are small and discreet for ladies, never overshadowing a hairstyle meticulously sculpted over several hours. Gentlemen's evening wear calls for the collapsible opera hat, a marvel of Victorian engineering mostly used for showing off at the theatre and snapping open dramatically at inappropriate moments. Then there are the event-specific hats, wedding bonnets trimmed in white lace, church hats with veils for the devout, sporting hats with mysterious attachments for fishing or shooting, and, of course, mourning hats, which are required by law, or so it seems to be 3 shades darker than your mood. Each is a public signal of your respect for the occasion, and heaven help you if you forget. Wearing a wedding bonnet to a funeral is considered the social equivalent of juggling in church. Children, too, are caught in the hat hierarchy. Boys must wear sailor caps or risk being mistaken for orphans. Girls wear bonnets so large that seeing where they're going is considered a privilege, not a right. Infants are swaddled in lace-trimmed caps, which serve mostly to assure guests that the baby's head is not in fact made of cabbage. To cap it all off, pun entirely intended hat, etiquette demands the right gestures. A gentleman must raise his hat when greeting a lady, but never too high show off or too low. Doormat ladies do their hats only in private and never in front of servants. The act of losing a hat to the wind is a humiliation best left out of family history. So the next time you put on a baseball cap and head out the door, consider your good fortune. In Victorian England, headwear was a daily gamble, a test of taste, timing, and tolerance for chin straps. Choose wisely, and your place in society is secure. Slip up, and you'll be the talk of the town before your tea goes cold. Every Victorian home has an army of spoons, each with a unique purpose. Grab the wrong one, and you might as well move to France. Welcome to the cutlery cabinet of Victorian England, where the humble spoon is elevated to a status so complicated it borders on the metaphysical. In this era, tableware is not just functional, it's a social minefield, and mastering the spoon situation is as critical as remembering your own name. Begin with breakfast, and you're confronted by a dazzling display. The egg spoon, the grapefruit spoon, the porridge spoon, and of course the never spoken of impolite company, multi-purpose spoon, which is only for emergencies and people who've given up. Each has a specific handle length, bowl depth, and decorative flourish. Choosing the wrong one, even in a moment of confusion, is enough to send the household into a spiral of whispered consultations and pointed glares. Lunch arrives and things only escalate. Soup. Use the soup spoon, but not the consume spoon, which is reserved for lighter, clearer broths. Tea. That calls for a delicate, slender teaspoon. Pudding. That's the exclusive realm of the dessert spoon, which must never be mistaken for the ice cream spoon. Wider, flatter, with a slightly rebellious spirit. If you dare eat ice cream with a coffee spoon, the cook may faint, and your mother will need a week of restorative naps. Afternoon tea is an Olympic event for spoon management. Sugar is served with a special sugar spoon, short-handled with a scalloped edge, designed to scoop just enough sweetness without the risk of excess. Jam spoons are dainty, almost ornamental, and often engraved with the family crest, or at least a reassuring floral motif. And somewhere in the tray lurks the salt spoon, because even condiments require precision. Dinner is where the full arsenal is unleashed. There are fish spoons, oyster spoons, and caviar spoons. each one a subtle reminder that the ocean has more variety than you'll ever hope to understand. The Victorian obsession with specificity is so complete that certain hostesses boast 20 spoons per guest, as if hosting a cutlery-based marathon. Some spoons are never actually used, but their absence would be noted and the lack remarked upon for months. To the uninitiated, this dizzying variety is overwhelming. Guests frequently suffer spoon anxiety, the quiet panic that sets in when you realize everyone else seems to know the secret code. The correct solution, of course, is to wait until the hostess begins and then follow suit, mimicking her every move with the hope of escaping disaster. But beware, even the most seasoned guest can be tripped up by a surprise appearance of the bullion spoon, which legend has it was invented solely to test the nerves of the upper middle class. Children are indoctrinated. Early spoon drills are part of daily life. Which is the syllabus spoon? Charles. No, that's for trifle, you little anarchist. Spoon discipline is enforced with all the seriousness of a military parade, and yet for all this fuss, there's a dark secret. No one really knows the true difference between half the spoons on the table. Most Victorians fake it, hoping not to be exposed as spoon charlatans. There are even etiquette manuals devoted to spoongate strategies, how to discreetly switch if you're caught out, and how to cast doubt on others without implicating yourself. Of course, the French, always the scapegoat, are accused of having even more spoons, or possibly of eating with their hands, depending on who you ask. Threatening to move to France is the Victorian way of admitting defeat. So next time you stand in front of your own cutlery drawer, unsure whether to grab the big spoon or the small one, be grateful you don't have. To remember 12 varieties by name or risk a lifetime of polite exile. In Victorian England, the right spoon is more than just a utensil. It's the key to your reputation, your sanity, and your ongoing invitation to dinner. As an employer, you must manage servants with the right balance of indifference and terror. As a servant, you learn to disappear at will and never, ever look directly at the sherry. Welcome to the grand stage of the Victorian household, where the invisible machinery of daily life is powered by a team of highly skilled professionals whose greatest skill is to not be seen, not be heard, and definitely not be mentioned in front of guests. Running. A house in this era is not so much about living as it is about choreographing a never-ending ballet of starched uniforms and nervous glances if you're a member of the family upstairs. Congratulations! You have inherited not just a home, but an entire social labyrinth. Your job as a respectable employer is to know every unwritten rule, from how to ring the bell once for tea, twice for brandy, 3 times for existential crisis, to how to pass your servants in the hallways. Look straight ahead, nod only if absolutely necessary, and never ask their opinion on wallpaper. Your relationship with your staff must be icy but fair, and ideally involve as few actual words as possible. Friendly conversation is viewed with deep suspicion. Compliment. The cook and the butler will start a rumour that you're planning to run off to France. Ask the maid how her mother is, and the entire staff will spend the afternoon nervously polishing the silver. The ideal employer maintains an air of mild disappointment at all times, broken only by rare, carefully rationed nods of approval. If, on the other hand, you find yourself downstairs, welcome to the high-stakes game of not existing. The best servant is practically invisible, able to glide silently across a market floor, anticipate their employer's whims, and instantly vanish at the sound of raised voices. Eye contact is strictly rationed. Smiling is suspicious. Laughing is absolutely forbidden unless the house is empty and even the cat has gone out. Timing is everything. Meals must appear as if conjured by ghosts, fires stoked before anyone wakes, and boots polished so brilliantly. The family can check their hair in the toes. Every task has its own elaborate etiquette. The proper way to pour tea without splashing, the correct angle for dusting the chandelier without risking a head injury, and the secret ancient art of avoiding the family dog, who has absolutely no respect for social hierarchy and will expose your hiding spot in an instant. Hierarchy within the servant class is nearly as complex as the one. Above, the butler reigns supreme, a mixture of drill sergeant and high priest, followed by the housekeeper, who knows every secret in the house and guards the linen, cupboard like a dragon. Then come the footmen, decorative good with trays, the maids, hard-working, good at listening to doors, the cook, never cross the cook, and the scullery maid, ambitious, mostly covered in potato peels. If a crisis arises, such as a dropped plate or a slightly undercooked pheasant, the only recourse is to form a tight, silent alliance and hope. The master of the house blames the French, and whatever you do, never, ever help yourself to the sherry. The last footman who tried that became a cautionary tale, whispered to every new hire, and commemorated with a sternly worded note in the staff handbook. At the end of a long day, servants retreat to their own quarters, modest, cramped and always one floor closer to the coal cellar than anyone would like. Here, and only here, can laughter be allowed, shoes be removed and stories of upstairs eccentricities be shared. If you're lucky, you might even sneak a leftover scone or two, but tomorrow it's back to silence, service and the careful art of not existing unless directly required. So if you've ever felt overlooked at work, just remember, in Victorian England, invisibility was not just a survival strategy, it was the entire job description, and if anyone asks, you were never here. Buying produce is a complex ritual involving nods, bows, and not haggling too much, unless you enjoy being shamed in public by a carrot. Welcome to the bustling cabbage-scented heart of Victorian commerce, the street market. Here, among the cries of hawkers, the jostling of elbows, and the ever-present waft of damp root vegetables, you must navigate the art of purchasing produce with the stealth and social grace of a minor aristocrat, avoiding scandal. This isn't just shopping, it's a public performance. And the consequences for a misstep are measured in snickers, side-eye, and sometimes actual bruised fruit. It all begins with your entrance. There's no rolling up in a hurry with your hair, askew and a basket under your arm. No, you approach the market at a measured, dignified pace, preferably in gloves and a hat of reasonable circumference. Removing your gloves to handle the produce is acceptable, but woe betide the shopper who forgets to slip them back on before exchanging coins. Bare fingers and shillings. That's practically an invitation to gossip. As you survey the stalls, remember that everything is layered with unspoken social codes. The quality of your nod as you approach a vendor sets the tone too. Shallow and you're haughty, too deep and you're mistaken for a lost servant. Bow slightly, smile modestly and never, ever go straight for the carrots. You must peruse in order, apples, then onions, then the seasonal greens, and only then the root vegetables. Skip ahead and the entire line will adjust their expectations of your moral fibre. If you spot a turnip you desire, do not grab it. This isn't a scrum for the last Black Friday television. Instead, point subtly, perhaps with a gentle clearing of the throat or a soft, "Might I examine that one, please?" The vendor will oblige, holding up the vegetable for your inspection like it's the Hope Diamond. You may squeeze, but gently. Remember, rough handling of produce is seen as a mark of barbarism and possibly foreign influence. Now, the moment of negotiation, haggling is permitted, but only with extreme tact. Offer too high, and you're mocked for being green. Offer too low, and the vendor may loudly announce your frugality to everyone within earshot. 3 for this beauty. "Lady Wilberforce, I'd sooner feed it to the pigs." The crowd titters. You blush, and the vendor's reputation is secured. The ideal approach is to suggest a modest reduction, then sigh in gracious acceptance when the price remains unchanged. The important thing is to let everyone know you could have paid less, but chose not to for the sake of local commerce and world peace. Should you need to buy something less reputable, say onions with a suspicious spot or a cucumber slightly past its prime, conduct your transaction with as much privacy as possible. Whisper your offer, shield the exchange with your parasol, and, for heaven's sake, don't mention it at your next dinner party as you leave. There is a final step, the departing flourish. You nod to the vendor, wish them a good day, and, if you're feeling extravagant, mention your plans for the produce. "My, what a soup this shall make." Never boast, but do let the world know that you and your turnip are destined for great things. Of course, the entire ordeal is watched by a crowd of regulars, other shoppers, vendors, and a flock of small children, hoping for a dropped plum. The unwritten rule is that everyone is silently judging everyone else. Did you overpay? Did you fondle too many potatoes? Did you fail to thank the vendor in a sufficiently earnest tone? If so, expect to hear about it at church, in the bakery, and possibly from your own housekeeper. So next time you pick up a plastic bag of carrots at the supermarket, spare a thought for your Victorian counterpart, navigating produce with poise, dignity, and the ever-present threat of being shamed in public by a particularly opinionated turnip. Shopping, in this era, was not for the faint of heart. Victorian gossip is a competitive blood sport conducted with coded glances and the occasional poisoned compliment. Survival means never revealing you have feelings. Welcome to the most cutthroat event in Victorian society. Not fox hunting, not croquet, but the Olympic-level pastime of gossip. In this world of strict etiquette, tightly laced emotions and muffled drawing rooms, the only way to let off steam and climb the social ladder is to become an expert in the fine art of information warfare. The stakes are high. Your reputation, your dinner invitations, and your chances of ever borrowing a decent lemon squeezer again depend on your performance. It all begins in the parlour, after the men have retreated to the study for brandy and serious talk. The ladies gather over tepid tea, needlework in hand, eyes flicking back and forth, like jewels seeking an opening. Nobody ever speaks directly. Instead, the weapons of choice are meaningful sighs, eyebrow acrobatics, and sentences that seem innocent, until you realize you've just been verbally slapped with a lace glove. The rules of engagement are simple. Never say anything outright, but say everything you mean. Did you see Lady Harrow's dress at the ball? May sound like a question, but it is in fact a full-on assassination attempt. The correct response is not to defend Lady Harrow amateur move, but to arch one eyebrow and reply, "I did notice she seemed enthusiastic about velvet this season." Boom. instant alliance with everyone who thought the same but didn't dare say it. First, occasionally the gossip reaches a fever pitch. Someone's cousin has been seen walking briskly in Hyde Park without a chaperone, or a family's butler has mysteriously left for the continent. Rumours of an unguarded sherry cabinet swirl. No detail is too small. No speculation too wild. Someone always claims to have heard it from a most reliable source, meaning their maid who got it from the grocer, who got it from the butcher's sister-in-law, who is never wrong. Men, of course, are not immune. Their gossip is delivered through the medium of pipe smoke and sombre reflection. I say, "Did you hear about Fortescue's investments?" Most curious translation. Corsica is about to lose his shirt, and his wife will have to repurpose last year's hat. The highest form of gossip among gentlemen is the concerned observation delivered with a frown, a sigh, and at least 3 references to the Bank of England. A favourite technique among both sexes is the poisoned compliment. "My dear, your hair looks so striking in this light," or "How clever of you to wear last season's colour so thrifty." These backhanded remarks can wound more deeply than a direct insult. And, best of all, they're nearly impossible to call out without breaking the cardinal rule: never reveal. You have feelings. To survive this jungle of veiled attacks and coded chatter, one must master the poker face, smile blandly, nod wisely, offer a non-committal indeed to any and all accusations. The moment you show delight, distress, or, heaven forbid, defensiveness, you've lost. Word will spread faster than a cold in a nursery, and soon your social standing will be reduced to the level of a cat with a bald patch. There are, of course, legends, Victorian matriarchs who could destroy reputations with a single, artfully timed cough. Some claim the Queen herself was a master of the well-placed pause. But even the most accomplished gossips occasionally faltered, tripped up by an accidental genuine compliment or an unexpected display of sympathy. Such moments were followed by days of recuperation and elaborate explanations. "I was simply overcome by the wallpaper, darling, so next time you're tempted to complain about modern office, politics, or a neighbourhood WhatsApp group, remember in Victorian England, gossip was not just a pastime, it was survival. Sport and high-stakes theatre all rolled into one. And the first rule, never let them see you sweat. The omnibus is public, cramped and strictly hierarchical. Sit in the wrong place, talk to the wrong person, or heaven forbid, laugh, and you're marked for social death. Congratulations. You've decided to brave the Victorian city using public transport. Gone are the days when only the brave or foolhardy dared the open road by foot. Now, for the price of a few pennies and a little dignity, you can squeeze yourself and your layered ensemble into a rickety horse-drawn omnibus where etiquette is more confusing than the fare schedule and the social stakes are higher than your hat, climbing. Aboard the omnibus is your first test. There is no orderly queue, just a tangle of umbrellas, packages and people hoping to look aloof while eyeing the best seats. If you're a lady, you must be helped up the steps, but not too energetically, lest your respectability be questioned. If you're a gentleman, you're expected to stand aside, hat in hand, and look as though you've never even considered a bodily function. Everyone glances furtively to make sure you haven't brought any questionable cargo, like a live chicken, a damp newspaper, or most scandalous of all, a loud child. Inside seating is an intricate puzzle. The front seats are for the better sort, or at least for those who look like they know what the better sort means. Middle seats are for people who understand the importance of looking uncomfortable but dignified, while the back is reserved for servants, the faint-hearted, and anyone with a mysterious cough. Should you, in a moment of confusion, take a seat reserved for someone of higher social rank, prepare for stony silence and more than one raised eyebrow. No one will speak to you, but everyone will talk about you later. Small talk is unavoidable but treacherous. You may, if you must, comment on the weather dreadful fog this morning, but steer clear of politics, religion, or any mention of feet. Never address a stranger directly unless introduced by someone who is at least a third cousin twice removed. If a fellow passenger begins a conversation about the omnibus schedule or the price of turnips, respond with a polite nod, a neutral indeed, and retreat into silence. If someone attempts to discuss personal matters, family health, or their opinion of the Queen, look out the window and hope for a sudden downpour. As for laughter, don't even think about it. Laughter is best reserved for the privacy of your drawing room, 3 doors shut, and a pillow over your face. Even a chuckle can get you labelled as unstable, Boris, or possibly French. If you do accidentally find something amusing, a child's mispronunciation, a horse with an attitude problem, smile into your handkerchief and compose yourself immediately. Physical contact is inevitable, but regrettable. The omnibus lurches. You sway into your neighbour, and now you must apologise in a whisper so soft it might only register as a change in barometric pressure. If you tread on someone's toe, the proper response is to look mortified. Apologise profusely and offer your own foot in reparation not recommended, or this while maintaining a delicate grip on your packages and the faint hope of ever feeling your extremities again. The journey itself is a symphony of clattering hooves, creaking wheels and muffled complaints. At every stop, new passengers pile on, and the social hierarchy must be re-established. You're never sure if you're sitting next to a viscount, a novelist, or someone who simply collects hats. Finally, as you prepare to disembark, you must make your exit without bumping knees, stepping on skirts, or, worst of all, making eye contact with someone you've ignored for the past 40 minutes. Nod your farewells, thank the driver never by name, and slip away into the crowd already composing your polite anecdote about the ordeal Victorian public transport, an exercise in humility, restraint, and the constant peril of sitting in the wrong place. In this world, it's not the journey or the destination, it's the etiquette minefield you barely survived in between. Bedtime means donning 3 layers of flannel, winding the clock, and reflecting on all your daily etiquette mistakes, while hoping you don't dream about someone seeing your ankles. Welcome to the Victorian bedroom, where the day ends not with the mindless collapse into sleep, but with a carefully rehearsed routine more complicated than most modern morning commutes. Here your night is governed by as many rules as your waking hours, and relaxation is achieved only after you've survived a final gauntlet of propriety, layering and, of course, self-critique. Let's begin in the dressing room, a cold, echoing chamber containing enough hooks and cubbies to out a small army. The business of undressing is performed in stages, with a delicate sense of timing, lest you inadvertently reveal a shoulder to a passing housemaid, or worse, yourself in the mirror. Outer garments are removed first. Jacket, waistcoat, petticoat, skirt, sash, and anything else that might have attached itself throughout the day. Each item is folded with reverence, lest tomorrow's housekeeper find evidence of your carelessness, and launch a whispered investigation. Then comes the main event. Pajamas. But not just any pajamas. Victorian nightwear is less lounge, around in a t-shirt and more prepared for a polar expedition. You step into your flannel nightgown thick enough to withstand a mild winter storm, then add a second layer, perhaps a bed jacket, and finally a nightcap with a bobble on the end, to keep your thoughts warm and appropriately whimsical. In winter, a third layer is not just encouraged, it's survival. The less of you visible, the better your soul will sleep. Before you get anywhere near the bed, the bedtime ablutions must be performed. Face washed in tepid water from a porcelain jug, teeth scrubbed with a brush so hard it doubles as a boot polisher. And, if you're feeling bold, a quick dab of lavender water behind the ears. No full body baths. Of course, you wouldn't want to excite the nerves before sleep. The chamber pot is checked discreetly, and the fireplace poked in case it needs one last encouraging glow. Now to the bed itself, pillows fluffed to Victorian specifications, sheets turned down with military precision, and a hot water bottle slipped beneath the covers to combat the creeping chill. If you're wealthy, a maid may have already performed the nightly bed-airing ritual, which consists of beating the mattress with a stick while humming God Save the Queen. If you're less fortunate, you do it yourself and pretend it's invigorating. Finally, you slip into bed, a process that involves negotiating 3 layers of bedding, a heavy woolen blanket, and the lurking suspicion that the family cat is already asleep. At your feet, you lie on your back, hands folded over the coverlet, ready to reflect. This is the hour for mentally replaying every etiquette failure of the day. Did you butter your scone incorrectly at tea? Was your good morning to the postman too cheerful? Did someone actually see your ankle when you climbed the omnibus steps? The only thing heavier than your eyelids is the weight of social anxiety. Lights are extinguished by candle, by lamp, or by a nervous relative, reminding you that electricity is unnatural. At bedtime, you may, if feeling particularly modern, wind the clock or set an alarm, but only after checking that it won't tick so loudly as to suggest emotional unrest. The curtains are drawn, the door left ajar just a crack to allow virtue to circulate, and you finally drift off, hoping against hope that your dreams will be properly chaste and entirely ankle-free. In Victorian England, even sleep requires careful planning, restraint, and layers. Lots and lots of layers. So the next time you slip into bed with nothing but your pajamas and your thoughts, take a moment to be grateful. You don't have to sleep in fear of improper nightcap etiquette. After all, in this era, dignity is for the daylight, but a good night's sleep, mercifully, is for everyone. In Victorian society, the only thing more terrifying than public embarrassment was having to apologize for it. Forget texting sorry here. Every apology involves a handwritten note, an elaborate delivery, and at least 2 references to your eternal regret for coughing too loudly during the vicar's sermon. Because nothing says remorse like a 5-paragraph essay signed in your finest ink. Welcome to the world's most delicate minefield. Victorian apologizing, a skill so complex it deserves its own shelf in the etiquette library. In an age where feelings are hidden beneath 3 layers of starched linen, a simple mistake, spilling a drop of tea on someone's gloves, or, heaven forbid, using the wrong spoon at breakfast, can spiral into a melodrama requiring weeks of diplomatic effort to resolve. First, You must accept that an apology is never a quick or private affair. If you've caused offence, even accidentally, it's only proper to express your regret through the artful composition of a handwritten letter on thick, expensive paper, with edges that whisper refinement and a watermark only, visible to those with superior breeding. Never use scrap paper, and for heaven's sake, not the back of a receipt or the margin of the morning paper. You begin by selecting the right ink. Black is standard, but blue is sometimes permitted for less grievous sins, such as mistaking someone's hat for your own at the opera. The penmanship must be flawless, the loops and flourishes of your script gently weeping with sincerity. No blots, no crossings out. Should you tear up the page and begin again, a messy apology letter is more insulting than the original offence. Now for the content. You open with a full recital of your sin. Dearest Lady Furthers, I write to express my deepest and most heartfelt sorrow for the egregious error committed during last Sunday's luncheon, and so on. With at least 3 variations on the word mortification, the true challenge is to sound as though you are on the brink of collapse without actually inconveniencing the recipient. Apologies must be effusive, but never burdensome. Too short and you seem insincere. Too long and you risk a reputation for melodrama, or worse, emotional volatility. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to apologize in person unless the matter is truly dire. Verbal apologies are for the most intimate circles or, on occasion, for when you have committed a social crime so grand, such as stepping on the Queen's train, that only a gravelling face-to-face confession will suffice. Even then, prepare a letter as backup. Delivery of the apology is another ballet. You cannot simply slip the note under a door. Ideally, your letter is presented on a silver tray by a trusted servant, yours or in a pinch a well-trained child. The recipient must open it at leisure, then, after a polite interval, respond with either a gracious acceptance or, in rare cases, a frosty rebuke. Your apology is noted. I remain, etc. Both parties then pretend all is well, even if the incident is discussed for years in drawing rooms across 3 counties. And what if you're the recipient? Etiquette demands that you respond promptly, but with equal delicacy. A carefully worded note of forgiveness is the minimum. A gentle joke may signal true reconciliation, but only if you're sure your counterpart's nerves can withstand it. Never refer directly to the original offence, except in the most abstract terms. That unfortunate matter regarding the napkins, let it fade slowly and with dignity into family folklore. So the next time you dash off a text message, apology with an emoji and a half-hearted oops. Remember your Victorian ancestors were out here suffering paper cuts and existential dread, all in the name of etiquette, because nothing, absolutely nothing says I'm sorry, quite like 600 words, 3 bottles of ink and a parlour full of trembling anticipation. You'd think the Victorians had enough to worry about with all their rules, but no, your houseplants are now a measure of your soul. Every proper home needs a lush fern in the parlour, tended with more devotion than most Victorian marriages. Wilting leaves prepare to be judged, possibly disinherited, or at minimum disgusted in your absence over tepid tea. Welcome to the greenest branch of the Victorian social tree, the houseplant parade. In this era, potted ferns aren't just a bit of decorative greenery. They're badges of respectability, emblems of good breeding and a public barometer of your emotional and financial stability. An empty window, still is an empty life. A neglected aspidistra is an invitation to scandal, the Victorian houseplant. Craze started innocently enough. Explorers returned from distant lands with curious specimens, ferns from the tropics, palms from the colonies, and orchids so delicate they could collapse in shock at a harsh word. These botanical trophies soon became must-have accessories for anyone hoping to appear modern, sophisticated and just a touch mysterious. Before you know it, London parlours began to resemble miniature jungles, every mantel crowded with greenery and every corner concealing a secret pot of maiden hair. Of course, owning plants wasn't simply a matter of taste. It was a commitment. Victorians took their ferns as seriously as they took their family crests. There were plant stands, plant cages and elaborate glass cases called Adrian cases, the Victorian answer to the terrarium, to display your most fragile treasures. Each case was polished until the glass shone and the plants inside looked like small, well-behaved children on their best behaviour. Plant care was an act of public performance. Neighbours dropped by unexpectedly to assess your horticultural prowess. Wilting leaves signalled laziness, or, worse, emotional instability. A robust, glossy fern, on the other hand, suggested you were balanced, hard-working and in possession of a well-watered soul. Etiquette manuals gave specific instructions. Ferns must be misted daily with rainwater, if you please, dusted gently with a feather, and never exposed to the harsh rays of the sun, or, heaven forbid, an open window. Competition soon emerged. It wasn't enough to simply own a plant. The best families boasted entire plant rooms, windowed sanctuaries filled with rare species and supervised by a butler who doubled as a part-time botanist. Invitations to a fern viewing became a coveted social honour, right up there with being asked to pour tea or choose the music at a family gathering. Small talk became impossibly specific. Your Boston fern is looking very vigorous this year. Lady Harrington, what is your secret? Oh, nothing but patience and an old family recipe for compost. As with all things Victorian, failure to keep up was dangerous. A single brown frond could spark whispers. Rumours of plant neglect spread faster than mildew. If your plant died and wasn't immediately replaced, people assumed all sorts of misfortunes, unruly servants, marital discord, or perhaps even a curse from the local forest. There are stories of guests excusing themselves from dinner to surreptitiously water their own plants, terrified that tonight might be the night disaster struck. But let's be honest, not everyone was born with a green thumb. For every thriving aspidistra, there were a dozen drooping ivies and traumatized beings. Florists did brisk business selling replacement plants to the desperate, while some resorted to plant borrowing, the Victorian version of renting a tux before important visits. Through it all, the plants, silent and stoic, watched the drama unfold. They bore witness to family secrets overheard, whispered apologies, and occasionally played host to the family cat. If only they could have spoken, the tales they'd tell might have rivaled any drawing room. Scandal. So next time you forget to water your spider plant or sigh at a drooping leaf, remember, in Victorian England, a houseplant wasn't just decoration. It was destiny, character, witness, and emotional support all rolled into one. And somewhere in the ether, a stern Victorian aunt is still judging your ferns. Welcome to an era where your social status is measured in moustache wax and sideburns average. The more elaborate your facial hair, the more people assume you have secrets, property, and a second set of cutlery. Maintaining your whiskers is a daily ordeal. Part grooming, part chemistry, and all about making your face look like a Victorian topiary. In Victorian England, a man's face was not just a face, it was a canvas, a battleground, and a resume all bristling with competitive ambition. To be clean-shaven was to be a child, a clergyman, or possibly French. For everyone else, the rule was simple. The more eccentric the growth, the greater the respect. Mutton chops, handlebars, imperial goatees, walrus moustaches. The names alone sound like events at an agricultural fair. The morning routine begins with an inspection of your facial hair in the harshest light available. You must check for stray whiskers, uneven growth, or, heaven forbid, a patch of bare skin that might suggest emotional instability. Victorian gentlemen kept an arsenal of grooming tools at the ready. Silver-handled combs, moustache curlers, beard brushes, and an array of mysterious pomades, oils and waxes that could double as industrial glue in a pinch. Applying moustache wax is an art form in itself. You warm the wax between your fingers, preferably in front of a fire, while staring pensively into the distance, then twist. Curl or sculpt your moustache to the desired shape. The results should look effortless, yet take at least 20 minutes to achieve. A well-shaped moustache could open doors, literally, as many doormen refused entry to men whose facial hair was in disarray. Sideburns, meanwhile, are a declaration of intent. Thin sideburns whisper, "minor civil servant," while bushy, sweeping burns shout, "I own at least 3 crumbling estates and my own billiards room." The truly ambitious go for the Piccadilly. Weeper sideburns, so vast they could conceal a whole pocket watch or a month's worth of secret regrets. Rivalries emerge. Men size each other up in railway carriages, at dinner parties, and even in church pews, comparing the length, thickness, and architectural complexity of each other's face forests. Of course, not everyone could achieve the necessary lushness. Enter the world of facial hair augmentation. False moustaches, cleverly attached with spirit gum, were available for those with lackluster follicles. There were even rumours of secret societies, the Order of the Golden Whisker, dedicated to sharing tips, tricks, and, when necessary, the odd packet of imported Hungarian moustache fertilizer. Maintaining all this foliage required discipline. Beards and moustaches needed daily washing with special soap, careful trimming, and regular oiling to ensure they shone like a prize-winning Bernie. On special occasions, gentlemen would scent their whiskers with lavender or Burger M, transforming their faces into mobile posture. Accidents could happen. A sudden sneeze might send half your moustache into your tea, while a poorly timed embrace could leave your partner picking wax out of her. Bonnet for days. Women, for their part, were divided. Some admired a thick, well-tamed beard, seeing it as a sign of vilify and prosperity. Others saw it as a mobile dust trap and source of mysterious household lint. Children, meanwhile, lived in awe and mild terror of uncles whose facial hair threatened to escape at any moment. And naturally, facial hair was the subject of endless gossip. Did you see the state of Colonel Fartherington's sideburns at the picnic? I thought I heard birds nesting in them. The ultimate compliment was to have your moustache described as regal, your beard as majestic, or your sideburns as the talk of the county. So the next time you're trimming your beard in front of the bathroom mirror, remember, in Victorian England, facial hair was more than just hair. It was identity, status, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and social oblivion. Just don't forget the wax. If you're left-handed, Victorian England sees you as either cursed or in urgent need of retraining. Schools, etiquette manuals and concerned relatives will do everything to fix your loftiness. Ideally before you ruin the family reputation by buttering your bread backwards at tea. Congratulations. You've just been born with the wrong dominant hand in an era so terrified of nonconformity that even the humble lefty was considered a medical, moral and possibly supernatural crisis. From your very first crayon squiggle or accidental southpaw handshake, you're marked for a lifetime of gentle correction, intense scrutiny and more wrist. Slaps than you'd find in an amateur fencing club. The warnings begin early. Nursemaids and nannies tutting in unison pry toys from your eager left hand and force them into your right. No, no, dear. That's the devil's paw, they'll whisper, with all the sanity of a state funeral. Grandmothers will shake their heads and consult their prayer books, convinced that your sinister inclination will bring on misfortune, unladylike handwriting and possibly a plague of frogs. School is a battleground. Teachers are armed with rulers, etiquette books, and a near-religious devotion to conformity. Should you dare to pick up your slate pencil with your left hand, the correction is swift and public. We write with the right, they chant, as if summoning the very spirit of Queen Victoria herself to oversee your penmanship. Desks are designed to make left-handed writing a physical impossibility. Ink wells are always on the right. Writing slants must follow the approved angle. And woe betide the student whose page looks like a storm-tossed sea of awkwardly curved letters. Meals are no better. Family. Dinners become nightly tests of dexterity and shame. Reaching for your fork with your left hand is met with gasps, aunts clutching their pearls, and uncles murmuring about the decline of manners. The proper sequence is drilled into you with military precision. Knife in right, fork in left, but only for cutting eating soup. Left-handed is said to invite bad luck, scandal or, at the very least, an unexpected visit from the vicar. Public events are treacherous ground. Dancing at a ball, left-handed leading, is considered so subversive that etiquette guides recommend gentle but persistent correction. Before your first waltz, try to shake hands left-handed at church, and you may be on the receiving end of a discreet intervention complete with pamphlets and prayers. Even sports offer little relief. Cricket bats, croquet mallets and archery bows are all manufactured for the proper hand, leaving you to muddle through as best you can, with the silent admiration of every other oppressed lefty in there. Etiquette manuals devote entire chapters to the problem of left-handedness. Remedies range from gentle discouragement to elaborate gadgets designed to prevent you from ever so much as lifting a teacup with the wrong hand. Some families go so far as to tie the left hand behind a child's back, the better to encourage right thinking. Ways. The advice is clear. Left is wrong, right is. And the family fortune depends on you not embarrassing everyone at the parish picnic by passing the salt, the unnatural way. And yet, despite the best efforts of society, some stubborn souls persist. Whispered legends circulate of left-handed artists, writers, and even the occasional revolutionary who found ways to thrive in secret. Occasionally, a particularly daring child will doodle left-handed under the table, or a rebellious aunt will knit with her wrong hand, earning a place in the family's secret history of nonconformists. So, next time you sign your name with your left hand or butter your bread anyway, you please remember, in Victorian England, left-handedness wasn't just a quirk, it was a scandal. a test of endurance, and a secret badge of quiet rebellion. And somewhere in a dusty parlour, a grandparent is still telling cautionary tales about the one who dared to pass the sugar anti-clockwise. So tonight, as you settle deeper into your soft bed, surrounded by the gentle hum of your fan, and not a single corset or table leg cover in. Sight, take a moment to appreciate the strangeness and the sheer stamina of the Victorians. They survived an age of infinite rules, social landmines and more spoon types than anyone could ever reasonably need, all while wearing enough layers to survive an unexpected trip to the Arctic. It's easy to laugh at their obsession with etiquette, the endless parade of ferns, the ceremonial teapot inspections, and the unspoken fear of an exposed ankle. But beneath all those rituals was a resilience we rarely give credit for. They found ways to create meaning, to connect, however awkwardly, and to maintain dignity. One handwritten apology at a time. So if you've ever worried about sending the wrong text, tripping up in a meeting, or saying the wrong thing at a family gathering, just remember, at least you don't need a 12-step apology letter for sneezing during dessert. You don't have to coordinate your socks with your social standing, and you can fall asleep tonight knowing that nobody will judge your houseplants, your breakfast habits, or your complete lack of moustache maintenance. As you drift off, be grateful for soft pillows, indoor plumbing, and the blessed absence of etiquette manuals on your nightstand. Whisper a quiet thank you to the ancestors who endured, improvised, and occasionally just ignored the rules entirely. History may be strange, starchy, and deeply ridiculous, but it's also proof that people, no matter how tightly laced, have always found ways to survive. Sleep well, and may your dreams be free of etiquette lessons, table leg scandals, and any surprise visits from a Victorian aunt. Good night.